Alright, so in this demo, I'm going to show you how to take your jacket slopers front and back and turn them into a princess seam from shoulder. Okay, so go ahead and trace off your slopers and create two working patterns out of them. Alright, here are my working patterns. Here's my front and my back. So let's start on the front. Okay, so we're going to make a princess seam from shoulder out of this. And right now it's has two darts. All right, so I actually want to eliminate one of my darts. So we know how to do that on the front and the back already. First thing, we know that this dart, each of these darts is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to eliminate, sorry, each of these darts is 1/2 inch. So I'm going to eliminate one of the darts by removing 1/2 inch at the waist and the side seam. Okay, and then because I did this in the front and I want these patterns to stay balanced, I'm going to do the same thing in the back. I'm going to eliminate 1/2 inch. Okay, so what has that done so far? That's removed a full dart, is what that will be doing, removing a full dart from my front, and then it's removed 1/2 of a dart, because these are inch darts. It's removed 1/2 of a dart from my back. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do at back is I'm just going to go ahead and remove 1/2 inch at center back, like we did before. Okay, and then that removes the other part of this dart. Alright, and we'll blend these in at side seam and at center back on these in just a moment. Okay. Alright, so now I've reduced each of my working patterns down to one dart. Now what I want to do is find out where I want my princess seam to be. Okay, so right here is my apex. Okay, this apex we moved over a little bit when we made our jacket sloper. We moved it out. It used to be a little bit further this way. What I want to do is figure out where exactly I want my princess seam to come from. Okay, so one thing you want to be aware of is when your jacket or whatever you're making is sewn together, you want that princess seam to match up when your shoulder is sewn shut. Your shoulder seam is sewn shut. So right now you can see I have a notch right here on my front panel. Okay, and that lines up with the first notch in my shoulder dart. So before these shoulder seams are sewn together, this shoulder dart would be sewn, and then the shoulder seam would be sewn together, and this notch would line up with that sewn dart. So again, when I have a princess seam, I want the princess seam from my front shoulder to line up with the princess seam coming from my back shoulder. So that's something to be aware of. If you don't have a notch here, or you don't have a dart here, what you can do is just fold your shoulder in half, like so, increase it, and do the same thing at the back shoulder. Okay? But if you do have a dart in your back, you should find where the first, you want to find out where that first dart leg comes to, measuring out from neck, and mark a notch here. Okay? Again, this can all be adjusted when you create your princess seam, and if you cut it out in muslin and sew it up and you find that they're off, you can always just adjust it right on the muslin and transfer that to your pattern. Alright, so here's where our princess seam is going to come from shoulder. We want it to come down. We want it to go typically through apex. Okay, this apex has a little bit of play in it because we moved it out when we created this. So if I use a curved ruler and just find a nice smooth curve, I think coming through apex might seem a little off, okay, because it's going kind of down this way. I actually want it to come, and I actually like where this dart, where it's hitting this dart here, okay, so I want this to come down and then go right through the center of this dart. Okay, and when I place my ruler on there, I can find actually a pretty good smooth curve where it's coming from that notch and going right down through the center of that dart. Okay, again, this can all be adjusted later once we create the muslin if we don't like it. Alright, so the fact that it's within 1/4 of an inch of apex is fine with me. All right. Another thing, if this wasn't lining up well with this dart, like it is now, what could I do? I could move this dart over. I can move it to the front or to the back, whatever. All right, so you can. There's a little bit of play in all of this. All right, so if you need to shift the dart over, you can. If you need to move this, you can. And again, everything will become clear once you make that first muslin as well. So I'm going to go ahead. I like that. So I'm lining up with that notch, and I'm bringing my curve ruler. I don't have a really hard curve up here. I think that would look funny. I want a nice gentle curve, and I'm coming right down into the center of that dart. And then I'm going to square that center fold line of my dart down to the hem of this jacket, like so. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this out. Actually, one more thing we're going to do before we cut this is, because this is apex, I'm going to measure up 2 inches. So here's my apex. It intersects right here. That's basically where I'm going to keep apex now. I'm going to move it over to that line. But I'm going to measure up 2 inches from apex and mark a notch. And then I'll measure down 2 inches, and I'm going to mark a notch on each side here. Okay. This helps me keep my ease, all right, because what will happen is this will be a curved seam on this side, and this side will be a little straighter. So this side front panel, which we're about to create, will probably have a longer seam. Most of the ease will be here, where the bust is, the fullest part of the bust, okay? So we'll want to keep all that ease there when we sew it together. Alright, so let's cut this apart. I'm going up the dart leg right now, closest to center front, and then through the other side, and following that line all the way up to my shoulder. There we go. Let's put that aside for a second. Now the center, the seam allowance of the dart, we're just going to cut right out. Like so. Alright, we're not done yet because we still have this side bust dart in here. Okay, we want to get rid of that too. Princess seams create a lot of contour and fit, and we wouldn't typically need this dart here. Okay, there might be some occasions where you might have to put a dart there. If the princess seam is moved closer to side seam, okay, you might actually have to have a little bit of dart after the princess seam on this side. But don't worry about that right now. And again, if it was part of the design to have a princess seam and a bust dart like that, then you could keep it. But in this case, we want to get rid of it. All right, typically you don't need that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all the way to the edge of this paper. So I'm going to cut down one of my dart legs. It doesn't matter which one, as long as it's one of the dart legs. And then got to the tip of the dart. I'm actually going to cut this way now. All right, so I cut to my tip of my dart, and I'm cutting this way in to the tip of my dart, leaving a small hinge there. And I'm going to, oops, it came apart, but that's okay. I'm just going to close this dart now. Okay, I'm going to make sure it stays together at the tip of the dart, and let's go ahead and tape this shut, like so. Alright, I've now closed this dart out. Okay, and I've basically created my princess seam. There's one more thing I need to do, and I need to true this side seam. So we're going to go from intersection of armhole and side seam to that point there. And then same thing here. With the notch, it's 2 inches up. I'll put 11 at that notch, bring this out. There we go. Okay. And now I can cut this off. Okay, so this is, let's just label it real quick. This is my center front panel, which is already labeled, and this is my side front panel. So we'll put side front panel. Okay. Alright, so let's put these aside for a moment and go to the back. So now we already reduced the back down to 1 dart. And right here is going to be our seam, okay, because we know that this knot or this dart matches up with the notch in the front, or now seam in the front. So right now I need to find a nice, I'm going to go off the center line of that dart and find a nice curve that fits. And that looks pretty good right there. It's not even close to my dart or this dart, okay? So I'm going to find out, I like it right there. Let's go ahead and mark right on the waist. And now what can I do? I can move this dart over. I'll do it in black so you can see it better. Remember, when moving that dart over, you need to find the tip, so I can just square off center back, since I know that's a straight line, connecting my 2 dart tips, giving myself a guideline, same thing at the bottom, square off center back, connecting my 2 bottom dart tips. There we go. Now I'll square off my waistline right where I put my mark, and I can square a center fold line of my new dart. These darts are each 1 inch wide at the intake, so let's measure out a 1/2 inch on each side of that center line. There we go. And let's connect that to the dart tips. There's our new dart. This one no longer exists. Okay, we've moved it over. Alright, now we can use our ruler and we can connect right to that dart. I'll draw a line, just a nice gentle curve. Alright, and then square it all the way down, squaring off that center fold, off the center line, or just extend it down. I'm going to put a notch about 2 inches above the tip of that dart. Okay, that should be good. And now we can go ahead and cut down the dart legs, separating these 2 pieces. And on this side, this back side, I'm staying to the dart legs closest to center back. Okay, just one. And then I'm going to come back to the shoulder, cut out the rest of this dart seam allowance by cutting down the other dart leg. And then let's cut out that dart seam allowance that we moved. So I'm cutting out the other dart leg closest to side seam. Alright, now let's finish here, removing that extra fullness we don't need. So from intersection of armhole and side seam, let's draw a line down to waist. And then same thing here, let's remove, so measuring up from that second notch, 11, and remove. Okay, and then that back, center back, which is this panel, we're going to go down from intersection of neckline and center back to that mark at waist. Draw a line. And here, again, if I extend that 2-inch notch over, and then I think I measured out 14 from that notch. Give us a little bit of curvature. It's in the back. And now I can go ahead and remove this extra. So, adding that little bit of contour to center back. Took out the rest of that stuff. Now, remember, if you want a center, if you don't want a seam at center back, you can't have contour because it would be cut on fold then. Okay? So you'd only be able to take out half of this dart and the rest would be ease. But when you make your muslin up, if you have a princess seam here, you might be able to remove some more from side seam or where the princess seam is. Or even in the middle of the panel, depending on how things work, you can make that adjustment. Okay. So there's my center back, kind of cut off, so right center back, and this is my back princess panel. Okay? Alright, so now that I have created here, let's see how this all goes together. Okay, so my front princess, my side front princess, my back princess, and then my center back. All right, so let's go ahead and trace these off and finish them. So I'm going to put these aside for a moment. Okay, so now I'm going to create a placement line and balance line to line these up on. So I'll draw a line the length of my paper. Oops. Let's try that again. And then let's create, so there's our placement line, let's create our balance line. So lining up my center front on my placement line, mark both sides of the waist, because that's what we're balancing on here. Now I can go ahead and connect that. And I'm going to extend that out because I'm going to line up all my patterns on this. I'll have to extend that out more, but I'll do that in a moment. Alright, so line up your center front on your placement line and your waistline on your balance line. That looks good. And take that down. Go ahead and trace it off. Okay. And don't forget to add in your notches 2 inches above and 2 inches below apex. Okay. And also, what was a dart tip, I'm going to put that in as a notch. Okay, you can remove this now. Side, I'm going to take my front princess panel and line that up. So I'm lining up my waist with my balance line. Now if you're going to make patterns out of these, you want to leave enough room to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. Be aware of that. So I'm just going to take this down. And let's go ahead and trace this off. Alright, and then don't forget to add the notches above and below, and then that tip of that dart. And let's remove this. And let's extend out our balance line a little further. And let's put our back side panel on there. Line up the waistline of it with the balance line. And then tape that on. Okay, let's trace this off. And don't forget we have a notch here. And then also where the end of this dart was, let's make that a notch. And remove that panel. And one more panel to trace off, and that's our back panel. A little further. Extend out that balance line. Line up the waistline of your back panel with the balance line and tape that down. And let's trace that off. And then transfer on this upper notch. That coordinates with that one, and then down here where the dart tip was. Also, I'm going to put a notch here. Alright, now we can remove that. And now we can perfect all these lines. So I'll grab a pen, start with my hem. Alright, so there we go. True them all. This is my center front. This is my side front princess panel. This is my side back princess panel. And then this is my center back. Think about our grain line. It's going to be perpendicular to our waistline. Oop. Forgot to true one thing, and that was our back neck. Okay. Grain line will be perpendicular to waistline, so you can just square off of there and draw a grain line the full extent of your pattern. So again, I'm just going to square off each pattern, or off the waistline of each pattern, to create my grain line. Alright, and there it is, the princess seam from shoulder. Okay. Now, you can go ahead and add seam allowance to all these. Center front would be cut on fold, unless you want a seam there. So that would be cut on fold. But everywhere else you just add 1/2 inch seam allowance around the whole thing. And that is how you create a princess seam from shoulder using your either torso sloper, or in this case we use the jacket sloper.